catch the fish and take them home to Liza. Hip hip partner, Sally to go. Hip hip partner, Sally Brown. Hogan, Quilligan, Morton, Hammer, all around the circle. Shots and rains to cover your face. Cake and tea for supper. Catfish in the spring of the year. Parade and Maggedy Butcher. Hip hip partner, Sally to go. Hip hip partner, Sally Brown. Hogan, Quilligan, Morton, Hammer, all around the circle. I don't want your Maggedy fish, that's no good for winter. I can buy as good as that down in Bonavista. Hip hip partner, Sally to go. Hip hip partner, Sally Brown. Hogan, Quilligan, Morton, Hammer, all around the circle. Here we go.
Is the sound all right? Okay. No? This darn thing. What?
When human personality will be regarded of greater concern than wealth or property or power, however great.
A computer won't help you win an election. Perhaps that's a little broad statement.
You attack me, I attack you right back.
And to feel like, as much as is possible in this kind of world, the master in his own house.
For, of course, this post-national trend is a worldwide one, and if Canada works out its present crisis successfully, it could serve as a pilot project for an emerging new mode of human life.
That's why my message is one not of despair, but of hope for the future.
But listen, you kid, don't get caught in the Canadian syndrome, where if it's Canadian, it's got to be bad. We're the best. I've been telling you the best.
Hello and welcome to the Red Ensign Special. It's been a little while since we've recorded one of these, so there's a little bit of housekeeping to do off the top. For those of you who have, well, some of you know, some of you may not know, I've done quite a series of outside appearances over the last 3 weeks. The first of which was an extended interview, almost 2 hours, with Benjamin Hicks, who is a smaller creator in the Canadian nationalist space. So you can go and check that out. We had an extended discussion of the importance of political theory and the importance of realism in politics. I would recommend you, if you're unfamiliar with the broader canon of my work, go and have a look there. It'll give you an extended backstory. I then did 3 outside appearances with my friend Academic Agent. Much bigger channel. A number of my viewers I got a lot of new subs from it. So some of you might be coming for the first time to this channel as a result of some of those appearances. If so, welcome. On this channel, we really only talk about Canadian politics. Though in the appearances I did with Academic Agent, I talked about U.S. foreign policy in the near abroad. I talked about the status of the the U.S. dollar system and its relationship to the U.S. empire. And there was really only one video where I talked about Canadian domestic politics, where I talked about Mark Carney and the pivot on mass migration inside the country, which is a controversial topic for the Canadian audience. But I think the data that is out there now really speaks for itself as to what is and is not going on in that area. More recently, there are 2 new outside appearances that dropped. One with my friend Radical Liberation, where we talked about the economics of AI and compared the current market trends around AI companies and the .com bubble, just as an evaluation of the current state. And another with my friend Cryptos, who is occasionally co-hosted on this channel, where we talked about the intellectual trajectory, the thought of Peter Thiel. I thought that one came out really well. I'm not aware of anybody else in this space who's done a really deep dive into the intellectual thought of Peter Thiel from start to finish. So if you're interested, go and have a look at that. I think on 2 levels. First of all, he's an interesting thinker in an objective sense, but second, it's worth looking at the intellectual leaders of the American ruling class, just to kind of understand exactly where they're at, exactly what drives them. All right, all that out of the way, I'm hoping to get away from outside appearances for a little while and get back to business as usual. This is the Red Ensign Special, which is the show on this channel where we look at in detail at single concepts from political theory, sometimes through the lens of current events, sometimes through Canadian history. And so the concept we're going to look at today is a concept that comes from, I believe its intellectual origin is as part of neo-reactionary thought, but it was quickly adopted on the Bernie Sanders left. And if you look at the artifacts that exist in Google image search, it's dominated by like Reddit versions of this idea that are just completely delusional. But the basic idea here is that in a two-party system, movements in culture are driven by one party and returns to norm are prevented by the other party, right? So the typical formulation from neo-reactionary thinking is that cultural change in the United States is driven by legislative change made by the Democratic Party and then adopted as the cultural norm by the Republican Party, who will then refuse to reverse the change. Probably the best example of this is changing attitudes in the United States on homosexual marriage and homosexuality more broadly, or LGBTQ more broadly is probably the better way to put it. You have during the Bush presidency, Bush II, the Defense of Marriage Act passed in response to a kind of cultural campaign from the motivated minority on the left who wanted to see homosexual marriage adopted as a symbolic capstone of the effort for LGBTQ sexuality to be integrated as an element of normal American society. You see during the Obama administration, the Obergefell decision, and you see the de facto Constitution of the United States updated to recognize LGBTQ identities as protected classes, and for the elements of that culture to be integrated into public school curriculums across the country, and as well as the normal cultural life. You know, you see Pride Day in the MLB and in basically all of American mainstream culture. So during the period of the Obama administration, all this happens. It's a massive cultural change in the direction of where the middle of the population is moved in the direction of the motivated minority on the left, and the motivated minority on the right, in opposition to homosexual marriage and in opposition to the normalization of LGBTQ in American life, is left behind. But when Trump is elected in 2016, the process does not operate in reverse. The motivated minority on the right does not get the Trump administration to make legislative changes aimed at moving the mass in the middle, which responds to cultural incentive, back in their direction. Instead, the Trump administration is the most gay administration in American history, both 1 and 2, centering LGBTQ voices in their governance as a way of messaging their inclusivity and their acceptability to voters that they're otherwise concerned about, forming the pall of this ratchet, preventing the reversal of leftward cultural drift in the country. You can observe this pattern repeatedly in American politics, but the ratchet is important not just for American politics. It is a concept which is closely mirrored in Canada. As we speak, the Conservative Party of Canada conference is going on in Calgary, Alberta. The conference was opened by the singing of our national anthem. Now, students of Canadian politics will know that "O Canada," our current national anthem, is the I would already have called it the gay national anthem, right? The Maple Leaf Forever and its links to the people who founded this country was discarded as the national anthem in the 1960s as part of the Americanization of the country and as part of the universalization of the Canadian identity to include people other than the founding peoples of the nation, right? This is tied up in part with the post-war wave of migration. It's tied up with the break from the British Empire, but that's all done. That's all ancient history now. However, the new anthem that they imposed, "O Canada," had some wrongthink in it because it said "true patriot love in all our sons command," implying that young men have a specific and unique duty to defend the nation with violence. An obviously true statement, reflecting the history of the country, reflecting the history of basically all countries ever. And yet, in 2015, when Justin Trudeau, I think it's his, I believe it was his second electoral victory in which this issue was addressed in 2015. This is unacceptable to him because he calls himself our first feminist prime minister. And so he passed legislation to alter the lyrics to in all of us command, right? A change which is obviously part of the broader program from the Canadian left to erase gender roles as an element of Canadian society. And so that happens. It is very controversial at the time and is widely rejected by the bulk of the base of the Conservative Party of Canada. And the traditional lyrics continue to be sung in most non-public settings. So if you hear the national anthem sung in like a public school, you'll hear "In All of Us Command." If you hear the national anthem sung in a private school, it's probably the traditional lyrics because they probably never bothered to change it. But the Conservative Party of Canada opens their convention by singing the version of the national anthem imposed by the Trudeau government that's been shoved down the throat of Canadians, right? This is exactly the same mechanism where the Conservative Party acts as the agent enforcing the cultural norm established by the left during their time in political power. This is repeated across a number of issues right at the moment in Canada. We had this week the Conservative Party of Canada, their shadow immigration minister, coming out and criticizing the government of Canada, the Carney government, for their plan to increase immigration enforcement against the large collection of visa overstayers that have resulted from the wind down of the TFW program and the student visa program under the Carney government. For those not familiar, during the period where Trudeau was prime minister, particularly between 2021 and 2023, millions of temporary foreign workers and students arrived on these temporary visas. The Carney government has wound down these programs substantially. The number of visas has dropped by orders of magnitude, and they have eliminated pathways to permanent residency for people in this category. A huge number of these people have, as a result, returned home. But Canada, for the first time in its history, now has a significant illegal population of people who have overstayed these visas. Government estimates put this population between 200 and 800,000. A lot of people. And so in the last year and a half, the number of deportations from Canada has more than doubled. And the Carney government wants to increase enforcement actions in this area in order to eliminate the formation of this large population of illegal visa overstayers. The Conservative Party is standing in the breach, protecting the so-called right of visa overstayers to remain in the country, right? Essential in preventing the drift of the country culturally to the right. This has been the role that the Conservative Party of Canada has repeatedly played. You all might remember the iron discipline enforced by Stephen Harper to prevent issues like abortion from being surfaced during his government, because the Harper government believed that these cultural issues should never be addressed from the right. They had electoral reasons to believe that, but it is what it is. And so we see one of my favorite pieces of political action that has occurred from the right in Canada in some time, executed by the Dominion Society this week, where rather than targeting the left or the Century Initiative or any of these other appendages of the Canadian left who are tied up with immigration, instead they chose to do a demonstration at the Conservative Party convention, going after Pierre Poilievre, a very weak conservative leader at this point, for his ongoing support of the cultural erasure of Canada as it has been. In other words, they correctly intuit, or maybe they understand directly, that the thing which is preventing their stated goals of remigration is not the left and its desire for increased cultural erasure of the country as it was, but it's actually the right and its refusal to permit their political victories to be translated into cultural victories for the right, executed through the political mechanism, right? If we got a snap election tomorrow morning and a dominating conservative victory, there is a 0% chance that the Conservative Party of Canada would execute a substantive program of remigration. And so the Dominion Society correctly intuits that in order to achieve its political goals, it has to smash this Paul in the Ratchet, preventing rightward adjustments in cultural policy on immigration. Really interesting piece of political science, really interesting strategy. We'll see how they do in their attacks on the Conservative Party, but it must be said that they not only cut a nice promo, but they also made the Western Standard, which is a somewhat important publication inside the Conservative Party of Canada's kind of elite circles, and made that publication presented in a pretty neutral light. So, it's going about as well as you could reasonably expect it to go, given the circumstances. So, well done to the Dominion Society for their efforts. All right, I think that's going to be it for today. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I hope you learned something, and we'll see you next time. I'm going to do a Red Ensign live here, hopefully this weekend, in which I'm going to come back and address a bunch of user questions. So I'll put a Twitter post out so you can submit your questions there and see them addressed. But there's quite a bit going on in Canadian politics and current events at the moment that I think you might like to see addressed. So hopefully we'll have a chance to do that.
Canada originally was put together by two groups of people who didn't have much in common but didn't want to be American.
The line just popped into my head. A bunch of the boys was a-whooping it up. And there I got my start.
We have had a flag. Flags can be changed. But flags cannot be imposed, the sacred symbols of a people's hopes and aspirations, by the simple, capricious, personal choice of a Prime Minister of Canada.
I have watched this country for half of my life from abroad, and we have turned complacency into just that, a national sport.
I am resolutely opposed to all innovation, all change, but I am determined to understand what's happening. I don't choose just to sit and let the juggernaut roll over me.